Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through how to write the EOC A again, so those of you who need to can use it as a review. So first, let's go to question 1. Identify the author's argument, main idea, or thesis. Okay, remember, this is the briefest of the 3. Overall, EOC A is a short piece. It's only supposed to take about 30 minutes for you to read the article and respond to all 3 questions. So be brief, 1 to 3 sentences. All right. Make sure you state the complete argument, including the author's goal. Okay. Very rarely is there a single element to a claim. Usually it's multiple things. So is the author trying to say that A is true, and because of that, we need to do B? All right. So think that there's at least always going to be 2 things the author's trying to accomplish, possibly more, but at least 2. And finally, do not simply restate or copy the thesis, last sentence of introduction. For this one, there's no reason to quote. So if you simply pull a quote or pull an excerpt from the piece, you may score a failing grade because there's something there that may identify part of the claim, but it is going to be a failing grade if you cannot restate the overall argument, not simply the thesis of the last sentence of the introduction. All right, so if you return to your EOCA stems sheet, these are just a sample of the ones that are on there. So these kind of give you an idea. You're not limited to these, but this could be a way of answering question 1. The author argues that blank is happening because blank. So this is a case where the argument is the author's trying to prove a cause and effect relationship. The next one, the author claims even though blank is beneficial to society is not worth the cost because. Okay, so this might be a case where an author shows how good something is, but there's a cost to that society for it. All right, the author argues that people should blank instead of blank. So we're doing A, instead we should be doing B. All right, be good if you can even expand this to say why. The author argues people should do blank instead of blank because. All right, that would develop that claim a little bit more and show that you have a stronger understanding of it. The author claims that blank reveals blank about society. So this was more of like an analytic piece. Is the author trying to prove something about the world around us? In all of these, be specific. All right. The vaguer you are, the less likely you are to score points. So instead of saying the author argues that war is happening because there's disagreements in society, that might be too vague. The author argues that conflict is happening in the Middle East because there are disagreements between different religious factions. That would be more specific and more of what they're looking for. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Explain the author's line of reasoning by identifying the claims used to build the argument and connections between them. Okay, so when we first practiced this, I had you to write a lot more than necessary to help you practice that skill of identifying claims. But now we're going to try to practice like the real EOC, where you're not going to write everything. You're going to pick the things that stand out the most. So it's not a magic number, but it would help. Try to shoot yourself as a goal, 5. All right, at least 5 of the author's subclaims. These are the smaller ideas that help support the author's major claim. You don't have to call them subclaims. You can say mini claims. You can say topics. You can say mini thesis statements. There's not a fixed language there, but if it's easy for you, just stick the subclaims since that's what we've seen the example so far. So once you figure out those claims, for each one, you're going to want to restate the subclaim, all right? You can do some quoting in here, and that's probably a good idea to quote a little bit at this point, but most of it should be your words. So it shouldn't be author's first claim is blank, let me quote it. It helps that if you can explain what the claim is a little bit, it shows that you understand it, because that's what they're trying to do. They know you can quote, but if you want to see the big credit, full credit, they want to see that you can quote and explain. All right. Finally, explain if the subclaim and the argument are logical or not. Think of the logical fallacies. You don't need to say black and white logical fallacy. You don't need to say slippery slope. Instead of saying black or white logical fallacy, I would say the author presents there's only 2 views. And because of that, it limits the audience from seeing any other possible solution. Or instead of a slippery slope, I might say the author makes a claim and says it's going to lead to such an extreme response. The author provides no evidence to support this. The reason you don't want to just list logical fallacies is because listing does not earn points. They need to know that you can explain it. That's what the credit's for. And when you list a logical fallacy, in your mind, you tend to go, I've done it. The audience knows what I'm talking about. But they can't give you credit on the assumption that you're right with that logical fallacy. You have to explain it. Finally, is it supported by evidence or not? So look at the evidence given. Sometimes the evidence could support the claim, and that's something you talk about. The author's claim in this case is supported by this example because. You could also, is the evidence related or not? It could be that the author is trying to slip in evidence that has no connection to the claim, and you can call the author out on that. Or you can talk about how well the evidence is related to the claim and how much it helps to support it. Okay. You can return to your stem for EOC A, and these are some of the stems that are on there. The author further develops his or her previous claim by also arguing. So this is sort of a transitional piece, like you're trying to go from what the author started with, what the author is now moving to. The author supports his or her claim with the example blank. The author attempts to support his or her claim with the evidence. Be specific with the blanks. However, the link between the evidence and the claim is illogical because. The author strengthens his or her claim by providing blank as evidence. Though the author's claim about blank is reasonable, he or she fails to support it with credible evidence, which undercuts his or her claim. Now, here's the thing about these stems. They're not complete. This is the start of what you're doing. Whenever you make a statement like this, you need to explain it. All right, this stem has the explanation built into it, but the others don't. So you always have to follow it up. Why is this? Prove this to me. Think back to our logical fallacies quiz. You've got to explain it. If you could be 100% right, but if you can't explain it, I can't give you credit. And neither can your scores at the College Board. All right, now there's question 3. Evaluate the effectiveness of the evidence the author uses to support the claims made in the argument. So just like before, I want you to select 5 or more of the sources the author uses, or the evidence or pieces of examples the author uses. What you want to do is decide which ones stand out to you the most, okay? These could be things that you discussed in question 2. It's okay. They are graded by a different score, and they're not looking to see that you're being 100% original between the 2 questions. They're looking to see that you can see those same things from different aspects, but you aren't limited. If on question 2 you want to discuss an example and how the claim doesn't logically support the claim, and now here you don't want to discuss that example in terms of credibility, there's another one you want to discuss. That's perfectly fine. So once you've figured out the sources or pieces of evidence you want to discuss, restate and or quote the evidence. Always be specific. The vaguer you are, the less likely you are to uncredit, because they shouldn't have to guess which thing you're referring to. Yes, they do have the passage in front of them, but the assumption is work as if they don't. Quote, restate the author's claim, mention what the author does. If the author's name is Jones, say Jones claims, Jones argues, Jones presents the following evidence, or Jones quotes from this article from National Geographic, which states. So be as specific as possible. Finally, and you can return to our credibility chart, evaluate the credibility of each evidence. You can look at it in different ways. You could talk about how timely the source is. Is the source 5 to 10 years away from the article? Is it older than the article itself? Maybe not a relevant source. Is there enough information to verify the expertise of the source? This is often a problem, especially in news articles. They don't give us the information. They'll say, according to sources or according to experts. Or they may even name someone, Dr. Jones. Well, Dr. Jones might be a little more credible, but what is Dr. Jones an expert in? How long does Dr. Jones have this expertise? Are there a variety of voices and sources present? This might be something as you're pulling the examples together. This would be a good place to say, well, all of the sources really all come from one type of thing. They all come from a conservative news outlet. They all come from a liberal news outlet. They all come from, social media. They all come from a single journal or academic peer-reviewed journal. In that case, it's not as credible because we're not getting a variety. Or you can say, look, the sources are actually very credible because we've got several academic journals here, and there's a variety because they also bring in people with firsthand experience, and they also bring in some news articles to kind of give more of a global perspective of people outside of academia and how they see it. All right. Next, is the source clearly biased or is it presenting an evidence-based argument? All right. A biased source and an evidence-based argument are both going to want you to do something. Just because they want you to do something and believe something does not mean they're biased. Biased is it's clear to you that what they're doing is manipulating the information, limiting the information, presenting only one way of looking at things, and trying to manipulate you emotionally to do a certain thing or believe a certain thing. Evidence based, they're going to hit you with as much evidence as possible. An evidence based argument that's well done should bring up that the other side's point, should bring up things that, may be criticisms and deal with those. So that's something to also deal with. Does the source rely heavily on emotional appeals or does it remain objective? All right, if the source is all emotions, then that's going to lower its credibility. If the source remains objective, that's going to increase its credibility. Now, doesn't mean you have to cover all of these in the whole Q3. It means you can cover a mixture of these. Show the different ways that the evidence is credible or not credible. Now, with question 2 and question 3, it's not required, but to make sure that your graders don't miss what you're saying, I strongly encourage you to have an opening sentence that says if the article is logical or not, and I strongly encourage you to have an opening sentence here that says if the article is credible or not. All right, these are from your STEM sheet, just a couple of samples. Look at your STEM sheet for more. But how could you do this? The source blank does not provide enough information about where the information came from to allow credibility to be verified. All right, you want to give the specific source. Is it an article title? Is it a person speaking? Once again, we turn to our mythical Dr. Jones. All right. By providing specific details about the source, such as blank, the author's credibility is increased because the reader can verify the information. So I'm going to mention the source and say, we find out from the article that this person's an expert who's been studying this field for 15 years and has been working at so-and-so university. That increases credibility because it gives us more information to verify. Here, maybe I find the author very biased. The author's bias about blank is clear when he or she writes blank. This makes the source less credible. All right, or maybe I want to say something good. The author includes multiple examples, including the academic journal so-and-so and the popular news column so-and-so. And the evidence shows that he or she sees the bigger picture, and this increases the credibility of the argument. Just like Q2, don't just write this and be done with it, okay? Instead, develop it a little bit, explain. Just like the logical fallacy quiz, you've got to explain it. All right, so that's a quick review of EOC A. Please come talk to me if you have any additional questions.